Anything Ghost number 139 is brought to you by HelloFresh. Delicious recipes and pre-measured ingredients delivered straight to your door. Visit HelloFresh.com and use promo code ANYTHING30 to save $30 off your first week of deliveries. Welcome to Anything Ghost. My name is Lex Wall. Anything Ghost is a place where people share their personal paranormal experiences, and I read them to you over the show. If you have a story you want to share, and you want to hurry up and get it in before the Halloween special, send it to lex@anythingghost.com, or go to the website and fill out the form there, www.anythingghost.com. Alright everybody, I'm going to get right into it. Here are the stories for show number 239 of Anything Ghost. This first story comes to us from Kimberly in the U.S. Grandparent's Haunted House. Ever since I can remember, my family has been haunted by ghosts. It started with my grandmother and her house. When I was little, my mother and I lived there for a brief period, and just being in that house scared me. Occasionally, the bathroom door would lock for no reason. One time, my grandfather had to get a screwdriver to unscrew the doorknob just so I could get out. One Christmas, candy canes disappeared from the tree right after my grandfather had put them on, and my grandmother had been the only one home. Things would disappear like that all the time. It was hard to sleep in that house. I couldn't get up in the middle of the night. I wouldn't be caught dead in my grandmother's living room by myself in the dark hours of the night. I could never explain it. The feeling of wrongness I felt in that house. Like something was always watching. And then I heard the stories. I've come to the conclusion that whatever spirit was in that house was able to take on the form of the occupants. When my mom was younger, she used to have a mirror on her bedroom wall. This was at the same house. Her friend used to spend a lot of time at that house, and she would occasionally use that mirror to do her hair and makeup. At one point, my mom's parents decided to take down the mirror for renovations to the home. My mom's friend came over a few days after that and started fixing her hair in the mirror, even though the mirror was not there. Also around that time, my mom used to put her hair in a towel after she used to take a shower. One day, my grandmother saw her walking around the house with her hair in a towel, and she began to talk to my mom. My mom did not reply, and when my grandmother searched the home for her, she found my mom was not there. The next time this happened, my dad was at the house. My mom and him were looking out the patio door at the big lake that the house was built on. My dad asked my mom, "I didn't know your sister was here." And he pointed to a spot on the yard where he had seen her sister. But her sister was no longer there. Nobody was there. Her sister had not been visiting. One night, my grandmother was sleeping. My grandfather was out of town. It was late at night, and she felt a pressure on the end of her bed. She stayed completely still out of fear. It felt like someone was sitting on the bed. And then, it felt like two spirits were in the room, and they were fighting right in front of her. And just like that, they were gone. My parents were asleep in the other room, and around that same time, they heard a huge crashing sound that woke them up. Then there was the time an uncle was sleeping over, and he said he heard something that sounded like chains moving in the attic. By the way, it seems like a good time to mention that when my grandparents first bought the house, a little boy came up to my grandmother and said something along the lines of, "Aren't you scared of living in that house?" and wandered away. We eventually moved out of that house and into our own home. And apparently, something moved with us. Or maybe we just happened to move into another haunted house. I'm not entirely sure. Either way, we were still being haunted by ghosts. Little things like my toys turning themselves on. Noises from upstairs, like typing on a keyboard when everybody was asleep. Or the chain of an old lamp clicking on and off, on and off. And of course, that same inexplainable presence of something watching you. Sometimes we would have to leave the house because that presence got so bad. I could feel it walking towards me, walking down the stairs, behind my back. It filled the house with its terrible energy. One of my friends once told me that she hated coming to my house because she was consumed by sadness each time she entered. It's funny, because the thing that scared me the least was actually seeing the spirit. I was in the hallway and turned toward my room, and right there in the middle of my doorway was a figure of a middle-aged man. He was slightly see-through, wearing shorts, and a simple shirt with light hair. He wore a blank expression on his face, almost sad. He was there for a second before he disappeared. And I've always felt that he was seeing me for the first time, too. My best friend lived right across the street, and it's interesting because they also have a history of being haunted. For some reason, I've always felt that was not a coincidence. We eventually moved out, and I haven't felt, seen, or heard anything unusual in a few years. But I always wonder whether the spirits will come back to haunt again. And here's a short story from Jordan in Ontario, Canada. Something in the closet. A couple nights ago, at exactly 3 a.m., I woke up after having a nightmare about someone or something being in my closet. Remembering that I had left the closet door slightly open when I went to bed, I decided to go shut it as the dream had me creeped out. I got up, turned the light on, and watched as the door went slowly from being slightly ajar to completely open, all on its own. I stood there for a couple of seconds, feeling confused, and then I shut the door immediately once I processed what had just happened. I've tried to come up with a rational explanation, but there's no way the door could have opened on its own, as it required force as it was on a track. What really creeped me out the most was the fact that this happened right after I had the nightmare at 3 a.m. And 3 a.m. is known as when spirits are most active. Needless to say, I didn't get much sleep that night. The next story is from Jose. I think he's in the U.S. He didn't tell, but most of the stories are so. But this one is called Haunted Costa Rica. Everyone was asleep in my grandmother's farmhouse in Costa Rica. My grandma had been separated from her husband a long time now. My grandmother's bedroom and her bed face the living room, which is lined up with the main hallway. This goes through the entire house. She told my mom that she was suddenly awakened for no reason in the middle of the night. She saw a woman in a white gown with a headpiece walking slowly from left to right past the doorway. The woman was walking slowly, and before she went out of sight, she looked back at my grandmother. Her face was like that of a mannequin, missing all the features on her face, just plain white skin. It freaked her out, and she could not speak or move, remaining paralyzed for what felt like a minute. The spirit then continued to walk without saying or doing anything else. A short moment after it passed, my grandmother noticed that the bathroom door, which tends to drag when you open it, was open, and the light was turned on. At this point, she screamed for one of her daughters, asking if anybody had gotten up and was doing something in the kitchen or the bathroom. They were all startled and replied no. Everyone got together and went to the bathroom, which was at the end of the direction the ghost had walked. Slowly, they opened the bathroom door, and there was nothing there, but the light was turned on. Everyone was freaked out, and my uncles walked the property inside and out with their guns and found nothing. My mom was talking to me later and said that sometimes ghosts or spirits are attracted to a broken home, divorced couples, etc. So my mom was suggesting that perhaps this ghost was a sign for my grandmother and my family to patch things up. And here's a story from Sid in Tacoma, Washington. Elevator Boy. When I first started working for our city's transportation board, I had to conduct traffic safety studies during the afternoon rush hour, which would last until 6 p.m. This was during winter, and by the time I returned to the office to drop off the equipment, it would already be dark out and everybody had gone home. I would park the vehicle on P3 and then take the elevator up to the office, which was on the 8th floor. Our office was in a relatively new building without much of a history. On this particular night, I was returning to the office. I stepped into the elevator, pressed the 8th floor button, and was feeling very eager to get home to see my wife, and was wondering what was for dinner. That's when the elevator stopped at Parking 1. The elevator door opened, and in came a young man, I would guess about 14 or 15 years old. He was wearing a thick cream color winter coat, carrying a backpack, and his face looked extremely pale. He didn't say anything, and we didn't even make eye contact. He was just looking straight ahead. When he got in, he didn't press any button to close the floor, and just stood at the opposite corner of me. I was so taken back by his creepy appearance that I didn't even ask him which floor he wanted to go to, and at the same time remembering our company policy of not allowing strangers to gain access to our building. So the elevator door closed, and at this point, we were both going up to my office. I was trying to think of what to do and how to approach him, and that's when I felt incredibly lucky when the elevator stopped again on the 3rd floor. In came a janitor with her cleaning cart and pressed the 10th floor button, 2 floors above me. Thank God, I remember thinking to myself. Hopefully he will follow her instead of me, and he'll be her problem. As the elevator began to ascend again, the young man started acting strange. He tilted his head upwards, and it seemed like he was gazing into the ceiling, which was a mirror. Then, he pointed his hand at his own reflection, and he uttered the words, "You can see." He sounded like a child when he spoke, and I remember thinking, oh man, this guy is weird. Just then he appeared to hunch over and grabbed his stomach and was groaning in pain, which became more intense. For some reason, instead of feeling compelled to help this young man, I began to feel terrified, and I pretended I didn't notice what was happening. I guess I was hoping the janitor would notice and that she would offer some help if he was genuinely in distress. However, I looked over at the janitor, and it seemed like she didn't notice anything was wrong at all. She had on no headphones, she wasn't distracted, and didn't look nervous like I was. This was becoming too bizarre for me. The young man's groaning became louder, almost like he was ready to scream in pain. And that's when we reached the 8th floor. It was only less than a minute, but it felt like I was in there forever. So I quickly stepped out of the elevator and hurried off to my office. After dropping off the equipment, I took the stairs and got out of the building quickly. As I made my way home, I kept wondering why the janitor didn't seem to notice the young man. Why didn't she even acknowledge him? And then it hit me. Maybe she couldn't see him at all. I don't know why that was, and until this day, I haven't taken that elevator again. Halloween is approaching, and for me it's a very busy time, so a service like this episode's sponsor is heaven sent. HelloFresh is a meal kit delivery service. For less than $10 per meal, they'll deliver fresh ingredients and recipes in 6 simple steps. We got ours last night. It was a vegetarian box, because I'm vegetarian. And I was really immediately impressed by the freshness of the vegetables. You open up the bag and it's like, wow. It was as if someone ran to a nearby farmer's market and dropped it off at our door minutes before. We got the 3 meal version. They offer 3, 4, and 5 meal versions in 3 varieties, and they now offer breakfast as well. After opening the box, we saw 3 recyclable bags, and they contained the fresh produce and the ingredients. The box contained the 3 easy recipe cards for each meal, and as well, they have nutritional information. And I just learned HelloFresh creates new recipes every week, and they include only enough ingredients for what is needed so there's no waste. So they have recyclable bags and they don't waste food. And the cooking is easy. I chose the grilled vegetable meal that we had, and it took less than 30 minutes. Just place the step-by-step recipe card in front of you, start chopping and cooking, following the 6 simple steps. And the most important part, we sat down to enjoy the wonderfully aromatic meal, and it was absolutely delicious. Aside from being a convenient big-time saver, eating fresh food made with awesome recipes, the HelloFresh meals will cost you less than $10 per meal. And, as an Anything Ghost listener, you can even do better than that. Go to HelloFresh.com and use the promo code ANYTHING30, and you'll get $30 off the first week of deliveries. That's $30 off your first week of deliveries if you use the promo code ANYTHING30 at HelloFresh.com. The code is ANYTHING and the number 30. So go to HelloFresh.com and use promo code ANYTHING30. Enjoy! The next story is from Taylor in North Carolina. Baby senses. I've had a lot of paranormal experiences in my life, starting when I was a baby. I've talked a lot about the house I lived in when I was older, but before all of that happened, my family was trying to rent a house from 2 older ladies. They brought me along since there was no one else to watch me. The 2 older ladies were talking with my parents to get to know them before deciding on renting the house to them. All of a sudden, I started to vomit, and my parents said that they freaked out since I had never done that before. My parents told me that one of those ladies was very superstitious and believed that my reaction was based on the fact that one of their husbands had died in the house not long before. There was another incident later on in life when I went to visit my cousin in her new apartment. I felt fine in the building until we reached her floor. There was a long hallway before you got to her apartment, and during the whole walk down, I felt queasy and cold. I couldn't explain it, but my father, who's very spiritual, thought that the feelings were caused by spirits. I didn't believe it until my cousin told us that the old lady that lived in the apartment next to hers had died just the week before. No one can explain it, but I've always been able to sense things, and my feelings are usually right. The last weird feeling I had was when my family and I were watching TV in the living room. I ignored it, but it never went away. Later that night, we heard my dog's claws on the wood floor by the kitchen, where she normally sleeps. We looked over to see if she was okay, but she wasn't there. She was sound asleep behind the couch. We were scared for the rest of the night. Next story is from Maria in The Hague, Netherlands. Haunted house in Venezuela. I'm originally from Venezuela, South America, and though I haven't lived in my home country for a while, the story I'm going to narrate happened there when I was a teenager living with my parents in the city of Barcelona, Venezuela. We moved several times when I was a child. My parents were enthusiastic entrepreneurs that invested most of their money in all kinds of venues, with little or no interest in settling down in one place. Therefore, I grew up in different places, nothing out of the ordinary, just old houses in an old colonial city by the Caribbean Sea. The year was 1988, and our new destination was a simple design 2-story house, built probably in the 70s. The disrepair was obvious, but I didn't care. I knew it wasn't our home, and we wouldn't stay for long, as my parents would find something better. Nevertheless, this house was different. As soon as we got inside and started to move our stuff in, we noticed that something wasn't quite right. First, it was the wax from the black candles at the corner of every room, and then the wooden little crosses over the frames of every single door. We all saw this, and although thought it was weird, we just brushed it off, maybe because we were pragmatic and had no interest in the paranormal or any knowledge of witchcraft, or maybe because we were in need of a place to live and didn't have the chance to pay any attention to the warning signs. We just kept things running. Despite this, the house, or whatever was inside, didn't wait long to let us know that this was its place and we were not welcomed. The first night we spent there, while we were watching TV in the living room, the faucets on the upper-level bathroom went on by themselves, with no possible explanation, and didn't stop until we gathered enough courage to go up there and turn them off. Again, we overlooked the incident and came to the best thing we could think of. This was an old house, with lots of repairs needed. Then came the nightmares. I started to have a recurrent dream about people I didn't know, looking through the windows from the outside and trying to get into the house, as if they wanted to find something lost long, long ago. I couldn't have a normal sleep for a long time, always having this heavy sense of fear, uneasiness during daylight or nighttime. The atmosphere was never peaceful, as if something was constantly about to happen. I was in my teenage years and spent long sleepless nights reading or writing, too afraid of going to bed because of these dreams. By that time, I started to have a strange feeling of living in the house with an alternate reality, where things work in a different logic than the world outside, a powerful logic that we couldn't participate in and only be affected by. The house seemed to have a life of its own. We were mere objects to be moved according to its disposition. One particular night, I was finally in a deep sleep when I was awakened by a terrifying sensation that I was not alone in the room. I opened my eyes to scan the place and immediately saw a tall lady standing by my bed. She was dressed completely in black. She had pale white skin and dark short hair. She was looking at me with profound black eyes, without moving or saying a word. I remember trying to scramble out of my bed, but was unable to do so because I was tied up in my sheets. I eventually freed myself, and out of absolute terror, I ran to my parents, waking everybody up. Since that experience, and because of it, I ended up with a long history of sleep disorders. A couple years later, another house came along, and I was more than happy to move. After we moved, my mother told me something she knew but never revealed until then. They didn't have money to rent a better house, and because of that, they took that one at a very good price, even knowing the previous tenant practiced black magic. The house hasn't been occupied in a long time because of its haunted history. We never went back to that place, and I ended up leaving the city and going to college, and eventually leaving the country. But over the years, I have come to realize that a part of me died in that house, and things weren't the same for me after living there. I know now that, afterwards, my fascination with the paranormal is just a way to cope with that experience, a way to understand that there are dimensions beyond our knowledge, and sometimes they overlap, for good or bad. To get you in shape for the upcoming Halloween season, I'm going to share a story from the archives of Anything Ghost. It's a very popular story from days gone by. Many of the old-time listeners remember it well, and the narrator is quite a character. He tells a great story, and we of the Anything Ghost family know of the story as Lee from Delaware and the Haunted Truck Story.
Hello, Lex and listeners. This is Lee from Delaware. I'm a truck driver, and Lex, I found your podcast about a week ago, and I enjoy it a lot. It's kind of hard sometimes finding an interesting enough podcast out there, but I found yours, and you do great work, and keep it up. I've got a story that I can share with you. It's about a haunted truck, nonetheless. I know you've all seen Christine, and this isn't on that kind of level, but it was weird in my little world just the same. This goes back to July of 2004. I was sitting at home for a couple of months. I took about a 3-month hiatus from over-the-road driving just because it was at the time burning me out, and needed time to sit around and think. I had a friend call me. We worked together at a company back in 2000, and since then he went on to follow his dream, and he took over his father's business, running tow trucks and a recovery service out of Nashville, Tennessee. I was surprised to hear from him, and we were catching up and this, that, and the other thing, and he goes to asking me if I wanted a one-time recovery job. And I asked him what it all entailed, and he told me basically, it's not a repo or anything. There's no risk of life and limb on this one. It's just go get this truck that he promised a friend of his who bought it that he'd go recover it and bring it back to Nashville. He had no other drivers to call on to do it over a weekend, so So if you got the right price, and which he did, so I jumped on my bike and I headed down to Nashville. I get down there, I meet up with him. He gives me keys to the wrecker rig, and he gives me directions, the details of the truck. It was what I was looking for was a 1976 Kenworth. Um, Kind of ironic because me and the truck were born the same year, but it seemed like it was going to be fun enough because you don't see too many of that age around anymore. So I get the truck ready and I head on down to southeastern Louisiana. Um, not not quite on the water, but out in the bayou nonetheless. I mean, nothing but country dirt roads everywhere you looked, and not a lot of room with 70 feet of truck. I'll give it that. But finally found the driveway I was supposed to be looking for, and wiggled it on to the driveway and wiggled up the driveway about a half a mile, which looked like it was going to dead end for a while, but I eventually came to this clearing out in the swamp, little clapboard house, and there's the truck sitting right next to it. Couldn't believe the shape this thing was in. I mean, it was immaculate. It looked like it just drove off the showroom floor. I felt kind of bad. I had to drag it up on a trailer instead of hooking it up to one. But the little old lady comes out of the house to greet me. She's got a folder in her hand with the title and all the shop work. She sat there chatting with me as I was loading it up and chaining it down, and revealed to me that her husband, Henry, had owned the truck, and that was his pride and joy since he bought it new in '76. He had passed a year prior in it, on his way back home. He was a mile and a half away from home. They found him in the truck. It was sitting gently on the shoulder of the road, running. The brakes weren't even set. And she went on to tell me at night on Tuesday nights, which was usually when he would leave, the radio would come on and play his Cajun music station out of New Orleans. I took it for what it was worth. It was, old lady looking for somebody to talk to and everything else. I was really not the believer that I am now. But again, haunted houses, maybe haunted truck. Nah, come on. She gives me the folder. She sets me up with a thermos full of coffee and a couple cornbread muffins to go. I thanked her for it. And I'd get back in the truck and I'd work my way on back out of the bayou around 9 o'clock at night. I haven't seen too much that is as eerie as the deep southern swampland in the middle of summer at night. And you get that. Well, I certainly felt that whole voodoo mystique and beings, or spirits rather, present. On with the story anyway. I got it back toward Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and I had to take some time, pull it over, go get a shower, and pick up a couple tools and odds and ends I was going to need. And I pull in there, and a bunch of drivers pile out of their trucks that were there already and watch me pull in with this old relic. I got it parked and went over to the driver next to me and gave him a 20 spot to make sure nobody stole it or took anything off of it. And I went on in. I guess I was in the truck stop for about an hour and a half, and I come back out, and it's close to morning about now. I'd say about 2 in the morning. The driver I'd asked to watch over it was still out there watching over it, standing there in front of my truck with his arms crossed and his head tilted to the side with this funny look on his face. And I strolled on over there to him. The driver's something wrong. And he was silent for a couple seconds, and he looks over at me. He goes, "I can't figure it out." "What can't you figure out? What's up?" He said, "Well, believe it or not," he said, "everybody done went on back to their trucks. I was in my truck doing my paperwork." He said, "Now the corner of my eye in my left side mirror, I thought I had seen the lights on this truck, the exterior lights, come on, and go off. So just one time." I said, "Are you sure that's what you saw?" Before I left Louisiana, I had to disconnect the battery, drain the fuel out of the tanks, and make sure it was secure. And I said, I reassured him. I took him over to the battery box on the passenger side of the truck. Excuse me. I opened up the battery box, and sure enough, I'm like, here you are. Batteries are disconnected. And I said, it's got no power to it. And again, I heard what he said, and I didn't totally take it for granted. I kind of put it in that folder back there. But at the same time, I didn't take it totally serious. But we both kind of had to come up with an explanation somewhat for us to be able to get back to our lives. And we settled on, it was reflections from another truck pulling in and out, whatever. It reflected off the lenses. He went back to his truck. I went back into mine. This is rattling around in my head while I'm trying to lay down to go to sleep. And I guess it spurred kind of a crazy dream where in my dream I woke up to see this truck sitting off the side of me, off my trailer, and it takes off by itself. And immediately I gave chase to it, only to get down the road and it, poof, disappeared right in front of me. Again, this was in my dream, but it was enough to wake me up in a cold sweat nonetheless. And I could feel just something in the air that was telling me this wasn't totally right, and there was something weird about it. I get collected, and I check the truck over again. I get it back out on the road. Well, I get over into Alabama, and it just starts pouring. Yeah, I mean, it's coming down in buckets. I couldn't have gotten any more water if I'd parked under a waterfall. I caught the glimpse of a rest area sign, so I ducked it on over to the right. I'm crawling through the rest area, and I kind of had to get the truck on an angle and a turn to get it lined up in a parking stall. Well, as I'm looking in my left side mirror to make sure my trailer wheels are going to line up into the stall, I go to get my sight focused forward again, and out of the corner of my eye in my mirror, I could have sworn I seen the lights on this truck go on and off real quick. My stomach kind of sunk. So I kind of sat there for a second. I'm going through my internal library of common knowledge and reasoning, trying to come up with an excuse for what's apparently going on. So I'm thinking, okay, there's got to be another set of batteries on this truck somewhere. So I get my rain gear on, I get out in the rain, and I'm looking up and down, left and right, inside out, underneath, on top, everywhere. No other battery source to be found. So I'm kind of befuddled, and I go back around to the original battery box on the passenger side of the truck, and I'm looking all around, make sure there's no other hot lead. Just looked over it with a fine-tooth comb, nothing. So I go to close the battery box back up, and as I'm moving my head back up in an upright position, the corner of my eye was kind of lined up with the passenger side mirror on this truck, and I thought I had seen the interior cab light on the ceiling inside come on and go off. This has weirded me out, and I looked around behind me and around me, and I'm the only person in this rest area besides a car that was on the other side of the lot, kind of over the grass on the other side of the rest area building there, but no other humans to be seen, not out in the rain like I was apparently. I get back in the truck, and it's just still pouring cats and dogs and everything else. And there ain't no way I'm going to drive in this. I set my dinky alarm clock for a couple of hours, and I try to catch a nap. And I found it hard trying to fall asleep, but eventually I got there. My alarm clock didn't do its job sufficiently, and I overslept by about 5 hours. And woke up around 8:30, 9 o'clock that night to a truck air horn. And that's pretty much enough to get a corpse out of the box, if you know what I mean. It's definitely not any way you want to get woken up, because it'll just fray your nerves. Totally. I jolt out of the bed. I'm groggy as everything. I'm looking at my watch. I overslept. Get my boots on, because now I'm throwing the curtain open and I'm going to go out and shoot somebody's head off. And I jump out of the truck. The rain stopped, and I'm looking around, and there isn't another truck around me. And I have to take a mental step back again, think to myself that there ain't no way. There is no way. So I go jogging out toward the roadway to see if I can see the truck that had just got me out of bed unneededly. I get out by the roadside, by the northbound lanes. A couple cars go by, but that was it. No truck to be seen. I shook my head. I'm in such disbelief at this point, and I look at that truck sitting on the back of mine. I was getting pretty close to the point to where I was about to dump this thing off of me, because it just, the weird feeling in my gut and just a weird mystique in the air and everything else. So once again, I had to get myself collected. I go back to my truck, and I get my load bar out and go around, retighten the chains, and I'm putting some angry force into them. I'm just taking it out on the old truck. And I'm cussing it left and right, telling old Henry, you ain't getting the best of me, buddy. Whether you like it or not, you're going back to Nashville. I get rounded up, get back in the truck, and I get back on up the road again. It wasn't much further, and I'm just dragging tail. I'm not able to fully wake up. I'm out of coffee, and I need coffee. I spotted an old 76 sign off the roadway, and I got off on the exit, had my fingers crossed that I was going to find a place to park. And anyway, I get into the truck stop. It's kind of one of them deals where the driveway kind of horseshoes around back of the station, and back there was a couple spots for a truck to park. Well, there's another truck there. Appeared to be another driver sleeping, so I kind of parked on the opposite side as far over as I could, so not to wake anybody else up. And bad enough I'm having the luck I am with it, so get it parked, and I go in, see if there's any coffee available. Well, there wasn't, and I had to bribe the gas station attendant $20 for her to fire up the coffee maker. So we're sitting there. It was going to take about 12-15 minutes. We're talking, and I kind of heard subliminally, in a way, multitasking, if you will, but while we're talking, I kind of, out of the far ground, I heard what sounded like another truck pulling into that lot. It was you could hear metal slapping and chains rattling. It wasn't 3, maybe 4 minutes. We're still talking, and apparently the driver to the other truck that was back there was a female. This female comes bursting through the door, hair all over the place, hysterical look on her face. And she's looking around frantically, and she sees me and comes marching over, pointing at me. "Is that your low boy out back?" "Yeah, what's up?" And she just lunges, grabs my arm, drags me out the door and back around. She's pointing at my truck. "You gotta come and see this. What's going on?" She stops and she looks right at me. She goes, I was woken up by that truck on the back of yours, fired up, redlined the engine, and just started hopping around on that trailer trying to bust loose. Come on, you gotta be kidding me. And I really had to take a step back on that one, because there's no way. I look over, the truck is totally silent, sitting there all by itself. She was very insistent, and I wasn't really, again, I wasn't to the point of wanting to believe that could actually happen. Truck had no fuel in it, no power. I got her calmed down enough to where I'm like, look, I'm sorry you got woken up. I don't know what this is about, but I can prove it to you. That truck is not capable of firing up. And I led her over there. I cracked open the battery box. I pointed the flashlight down on the batteries. I said, what do you see? Well, those batteries are disconnected. I said, exactly. And there ain't no fuel in them tanks. And she kept insisting. And I wasn't to the point to where I was going to call her a liar, but again, I heard what she said, but I wasn't. I was just totally discounting it. I tried to reassure, look, go back to your truck, go back to sleep. I'll get this thing out of here. You ain't got to worry about it. So I get back in it. I pull it around to the side of the station so I can run in, get my coffee, get a hot dog to go, hopefully. And the attendant, she was all jumping about. What's going on? Do I need to call the cops? I'm like, no, calm down. Something happened out there with my truck. I made up a dumb excuse. I didn't set the brakes. It rolled forward, let it woke her up, yada, yada, yada. I got what I needed, got on out of there, got on up the road. This is all going through my mind because when you drive a truck, you got nothing else better to do than to think, especially when there ain't a whole lot of traffic out. Going through my library of reasoning and knowledge, and all I knew was I was going to get it back to Nashville, get it off my back, get my check, and go home. So that's basically where and it's late. I don't even remember what time it was at this point, but I went and looked in my mirror, and state patrolman pulled up behind me, lights on, beeping his horn. Driver, pull over. And I'm thinking to myself, great. My bad luck just went to worse. See if I get an award this time. So I pull it over, and I turn the truck off, and I sit there patiently waiting for him to come tell me what I did wrong. Sure enough, he makes it up to my passenger door, and just very agitated look on his face, and just starts screaming, and he's asking me questions, but at the same time screaming, and he pulls his gun out. Driver, get out of the truck now. Okay. Got my hands up. Crawl out slowly. I do everything he tells me. Hands up behind your head. Walk back to my car. Behind your back. He throws the cuffs on me. Meanwhile, I've asked him already 3 times, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? Nothing. Cuffs me, turns me around, leans me up against the car. Driver, who's in that truck that's sitting on your trailer? I said, officer, there's nobody in that truck. Driver, who is in the truck that's sitting on your trailer? I said, officer, I've stopped about 4 or 5 times since I've picked this thing up. I guarantee you there's nobody inside that truck. Driver, if I go up there and there's somebody in that truck, you're going under my jail tonight. Do you understand? At this point, I'm just ready to say the hell with it all. Whatever. Go ahead, check it. And as he was walking away, oh, by the way, tell Henry I said hi, will you? He turns around. Don't be a smart-ass look on his face. So he moseys on up there with his flashlight and his gun, and He's all up on looking under it and on top, and he's in and out both sides of the truck, cussing about. He's not finding nothing, scratching his head, and he can't figure out why he's not finding somebody in that truck. Well, he eventually works his way back, puts his gun away, and he walks up to me and says, "Well, driver, I think I owe you an apology." I said, "Well, before you go that far, can you first tell me why you pulled me over?" And he pauses for a couple seconds and he goes, "Well, I was parked in the median back there when you went by me." He says, "You weren't speeding. You looked okay as you were going by. So, I was going to let you go on." He said, "But as soon as you went by and I got to look on the backside of you," he said, "I noticed the brake lights on this truck that's on your trailer were flashing. And it wasn't hazard style. It had a rhythm to it." He said, "So I jumped in and gave chase to you to see what's going on." He said, "The closer I got to you," he said, "I watched those tail lights and I'd recognize them as Morse code, SOS. He said, "So that's when I threw the lights on you, pulled you over." SOS? Are you kidding me? It's got no power. The batteries aren't connected. There's no possible way. I've checked the truck a couple of times. There's no extra batteries on the truck. There's no power, nothing connected. Says, "Driver, I don't know what to tell you." I said, "Bring your flashlight." And he gets the cuffs off me. We go over there with his flashlight. Prove to him, look, there is no power to this truck. "Driver, are you sure there's no other battery?" "I am positive." And he puts his head down. He's sitting there thinking for a second. He says, "Well, do you have any a complaint you want to file?" I said, "I just want to get this truck to Nashville." He goes, "Driver, you have a good night." And he couldn't get out of there faster. I'm standing there on the shoulder. I've seen my share of weird things, and my temper has been tested quite a few times. And I give Bobby, my friend who put me on this job, a call. I got him out of bed. "Send another driver down here. I'll meet him in Birmingham, but they're bringing it the rest of the way back." "What are you talking about? What's wrong?" I said, "Man, this thing is cursed. It's voodoo all over it, something." I said, "But lights are coming on. It's starting up by itself. I got cops pulling me over. The batteries aren't connected. There's no fuel in it. Nothing." I was like, "This thing is wigging me out. I'm on the verge of losing it." I said, "Send me a shrink while you're at it." He's like, "What kind of drugs are you on, Lee?" Dude, I'm telling you, there's something weird about this truck." And we went back and forth, back and forth. Eventually, he coaxed me into bringing it the rest of the way. Well, I get it back up to Nashville in the morning. I parked the trailer by one of his shop doors, so all he had to do was tilt it up and roll the thing right into the shop. And I got away from it. I parked the truck end of it on the other end of the lot, and I just sat there until Bobby came in the morning. I just stared at it. In that time span is when I finally had to come to terms with there is something in that truck, and it did not want to leave home. I tried to explain this stuff to Bobby. He didn't want to hear it, and when we finally got the truck off the trailer, if you looked on the deck, you saw 8 rectangular marks where the rear tires were setting, where it evidently was spinning out on the deck. I'm trying to put 2 and 2 together for him, and he just really wasn't hearing it. He was almost ready to send me for a drug test. But it was a really strange occurrence in my life, and since then, yeah, it's been a weird ride, but it definitely humbled me in a lot of ways, to where being human has a lot more, it makes a lot more sense, if you will. I've seen the truck one other time, actually. Last year, I was coming out of Reno in the middle of the night. And I was about the only one out on the road. I hadn't seen anybody for a while, and I looked in my mirror, and a truck came up over the hill behind me, coming up on me. And I get on the radio and try to get the driver on it, and tell him, go ahead and get in the left lane. Well, wasn't getting nobody on the radio, and the closer this truck got, I could tell it was an older KW. I thought, huh. So he got a little closer, and the closer he got, the more I noticed this was the same paint job on that truck of old Henry. And my stomach just hit my feet. I'm like, oh man. And I keep looking in my mirror, and I'm still trying for the driver on the radio, nothing. And as the truck is going by me at 10 clicks faster than me, I noticed all the windows were mirror tinted like aviator sunglasses, so you couldn't see in, but just kept right on getting it with a flatbed of coils. And I flashed them anyway with the lights, telling me to come back over from the left lane, honked the horn and flashed me back, and just kept right on going. So whether there was a driver in at that time or not, I have no idea, but it wouldn't surprise me nonetheless. There you go. Hope you enjoyed it. And like I said, I much rather would have done it this way. I tried to type it out, but it was way too long. But enjoy your show. I'm going to keep on listening. And have a good one, Lex. Have a good one, listeners. I'm Lee, and I'm out of here. Later.
So where were you in late January of 2006? I know of one night where I was recording the first Anything Ghost podcast. It was a pretty short episode. I think it was like 12 minutes, something like that. Probably less. I just talked about what the podcast was going to be about. Didn't expect anything was going to come out of it. And then here we are 11 some years later, and it's still around, still going strong. But back then I used to listen to Haunted New Jersey, was one of my favorites. And then I listened to Jim Harold's Paranormal Podcast. That was around at the time. And there were other ghostly talk, but there weren't as many podcasts, ghost-related podcasts, as there are today. But you can gain access to that complete Anything Ghost archive going to that very first show on January of 2006. And that's because I house the complete archives on the Anything Ghost VIP group website. And once you join with the one-time membership fee, you'll have access to the complete archives, and you can listen to your heart's desire. If you want more information, go to www.anythingghost.com and then go to the Join the VIP Group tab. And that's it for Anything Ghost show number 239. And don't forget to check out our sponsor, HelloFresh, HelloFresh.com, with the promo code Anything30 to save $30 off your first week of deliveries. It's a great deal, everybody. Check it out. And if you have a story for the Halloween special,